And I asked CAO Fuller to list all attendees verbally.
Alrighty, I have Foreman Patrick Taylor, CAO Teresa Fuller, Councillor Cindy Oram, Mayor Rob McDonald, Jackie Northey, our council member, and oh yeah, what's his name? Kyle McIntosh, council member. Online by Zoom, I have Councillor Brian Gust. I have Kevin Sabo with the Bashaw Star. I have Terry Brown Gust. And I have Stu Sackeld. And then I also have a Tom Shipton. And in our gallery here at the hall, I also have Allison Knockley.
Thank you, Teresa. No public hearings tonight. Any additions or amendments to the agenda?
I was just going to question the order of new and unfinished business. I'm just wondering if, since this 7.2, 7.3, and 7.4 are all monetary related, if the interim budget should come after we discuss those. I'm fine either way, I'm just asking if that should be the order.
Well, the Canadian National Railway crossing maintenance, those funds would be a capital expenditure and not impact the operating budget.
Okay.
And then the 1221, we're going to be reviewing that in greater detail when we generate the water pricing for council.
Okay.
So, like, yes, the 1221 does impact our budget. But as I've kind of mentioned, even in the information piece, it is an interim budget. It simply enables us to continue paying bills in the new year. And we will be presenting to council the full breakdown of the water pricing and how the adjustments in the per cube amount are impacting our residents and the water pricing to our residents.
Okay, no, that's fine.
I think we have a great deal of impact.
Yeah, okay, I just was questioning that, so I'm happy to keep it as is.
Is that a motion?
I can make a motion.
Thank you, Cindy. All in favor? Carried. And minutes from last meeting.
Make a motion to accept the minutes as presented.
Thank you, Jackie. All in favor? Carried.
Brian, Carrie as
The
well.
delegation is waiting until later. No bylaws. 7.1 interim budget.
Alrighty. Basically, this is a really fast, quick version of the interim budget. It's a preliminary draft. It proposes a possible increase of 8.6%. Administration plans to provide a detailed breakdown for final approval within the first quarter of 2022. Council will have opportunity to implement changes prior to final approval. It is helpful to have the auditor's reports prior to approving the annual operating budget. The draft budget is presented to enable administration to continue paying invoices and staff in the new year. And comments here within the discussion section. Approving the interim budget provides us with the ability to continue operations. Some general comments. The additional revenue from the Rogers Tower has been included, and that's about $10,500. Annual policing costs increased from $23,572 to $31,407. Payroll increase of 0.9% to support merit wage adjustments. And so typically I believe it's impacting about 3 staff. There hasn't been any wage adjustments or cost of living adjustments since about 2018. So, and typically they impact the budget quite a bit more. The community hall project, so a couple of years ago when we got the boards on the roof for the rooftop units replaced, council at the time had opted to fund that project set amount per month for 3 years. So that's scheduled to be completed or paid up by about August of this year, of 2022. And then the full allocation of the Fortis franchise fee of 18,000 has been included for beautification projects. And the water revenue is based on estimations of our 2021 water sales. So we basically took, okay, this is our revenue for the year for the first 5 invoicing periods. And then we just worked it backwards to come up with an estimation. Again, council basically needs to adopt an operating budget for each calendar year, and you may adopt an interim operating budget for part of the calendar year.
When do you do the budget?
Early,
Like January,
kind of,
February?
usually once the province tells us how much they're gonna give us, then we know we got
There's a
what it is.
couple of things, so we get our assessment information by about the end of February, and then our final audit information and like the journal, adjusting journal entries and stuff usually don't come till about April. So a lot of times we're kind of putting the final touches in April and getting prepared to run taxes and everything for May and out by the 1st of June. So, but we can certainly work on getting it approved prior. It just means that there may be some adjustments to be made if you don't have all the information.
Provincial budget is typically middle March though.
They've been running about middle March. Their mandate is actually to have it by the end of February, like the last week in February is usually when they're supposed to have it. However, they typically don't have it until the middle of March. They surpass their timelines for like the school requisitions, and then they opt. It's kind of unusual with the school requisition how they deal with that, because there are times where they've adjusted the school requisition. So they give us a percentage and say, hey, it's gonna be the same percentage as last year, but then the assessment amount will change and the amount we pay will change.
So we can't do a lot without the provincial budget.
Not typically, but it's usually the grant areas that impact the most from the provincial.
So, because I haven't been here before, how close is what you've got here to what it was last year?
The last year's amount is $785,890.
Oh, I see that. Okay, yeah. Yeah.
And so this budget, as an interim, is proposing $859,800.76 to be raised through taxation. But there's other ways too that we could reduce that if we end up, adjusting water pricing or adjusting garbage or sewer, like those are our other main sources of revenue, or user fee, similar to like the recreation, the ice fee. Would be another fee that could be adjusted. But that one is always kind of a tricky one because we haven't aged, well, the building is older. So to charge anything more than $90 for regular residents, like local residents per hour for ice time, it's kind of challenging because most people pay more, significantly more for ice time, but in a higher end facility, right?
So just one other question is, do you anticipate the interim being fairly close in general? Is it usually fairly close to what the actual budget would be?
In the past, the interims were significantly higher than what we've actually approved.
That's what I wondered.
And
It's when the whole budget comes.
Yeah.
That's when we as a council start going through it line by line
Yeah.
and saying, no,
Got it. Yeah.
no,
Okay.
you can't have
That's
that.
what generally what I
It
was
should be one.
asking. Do you find that it's higher or lower than north end?
And as I was even printing this off, I printed it off once, and then I was like, oh, missed this. But then as I was going through it, there was a couple of revenue lines that I noticed were not included on there. And then typically too, when you think of grants like the municipal operating grant, so we get 59,000 and some dollars. And that the auditor requires that we embed that into our operating. So then what we have to make sure that we do is create offsetting, like determine what we're spending that grant on, rather than saying, okay, library, handyman, blah, 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 have those ones, and then the rest just into operating. They don't want us to do that. They want us to have specific areas that are covered within a set of guidelines. And so another part to it is where I will move forward and say, here's what we propose for the MSI operating grant. And there may be additional things that could drive budget up a smidge.
Perfect.
So
Thank you.
the other thing that may be a reality on the flip side is being that we have surpassed what we anticipated for purchasing in water for the year, they often true up the water and cut us a check. So, and they're only allowed to retain about a maximum of $30,000 annually for the true up process. Anytime we surpass that $30,000, they cut us a check.
Okay.
So that has been a helpful thing to kind of land our way to.
So this 8.6% in real terms is very likely nowhere near that.
It could change, and it is all driven by council decision. So you could, when we get through all of the line by line sections, there may be significant areas where you're like, no.
So where do, like, I know BDSS and the library have come in and asked for money, so where does that fall within this, or is that separate?
That's typically lands in the community services departments. And so, when we do the full on budget, there will be a complete breakdown of each area.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is just, again, a summarized by department version.
Yeah.
And again, in the new year, we can go through it in great detail and, also include any public engagement if you guys want to, have the public come and review a version of it together, or, I know past councils basically, communicated to me that all of the council meetings are public and anyone can attend them at any time. But in the same token, a town hall budget meeting, wasn't something they were interested in doing, but you as a new council may feel differently. It's hard to say, and we can certainly accommodate it whichever way council prefers.
I have 3 quick technical questions. So the first one is on employee wages. Do we use a grid, or how is that wage structure determined for staff?
We do not use a grid.
Okay.
However, we do have access to a wage surveys. So through the AUMA, they do an annual wage survey that includes like comparables. We can compare ourselves to various municipalities, which can be kind of tricky because if you just say compare to 3 other towns, well, if their assessment or populations aren't anywhere near ours, it's not a valid comparison.
Right.
And so I tend to use like Alex, Clive, Forestburg, or some of my baselines. So I can ask them to put together a report comparatively of wages, and it includes everything from council remuneration, CAO, administration, public works. And I use that as a guideline. In the past, I've done a significant amount of research through the the province has a website where you can do comparables for careers.
Mm-hmm.
It's an Alice website or
Yeah.
something like that. So you can do comparisons, and I've done that in the past. However, it's kind of tricky because, again, it goes back to, if you look at, let's say, County of Stettler, for example, they're a public works person. People get paid significantly more because their assessment base and their operating is
That's what I
different.
was just gonna ask.
And their public works may only be a grader operator or just a bobcat operator.
Right.
Where our public works have like a really vast array of activities that they do. So yes, we have Peter, who's a water operator and a sewer operator, as well as equipment operator, but he does a lot more things. And as does Patrick, right? Or Lindy, or the other staff when we're full roster, right? So it's challenging, but when I compare to what other small municipalities of similar size, similar assessment, we are in alignment. And it's also hard too, because I like to look locally and see, okay, what are other local employers paying and how do we compare? But then, you know, everybody, like I'm not privy to a lot of that information, so it can be kind of tricky.
But you try to go with apples to apples as much as possible.
Yeah.
My second technical question, correct me if I'm wrong, past council approved and increased the number of administration staff beginning this coming January, I believe.
It actually was a retention of administration staff.
Okay,
So our administration staffing model currently is one part-time staff, 3 days a week, and then the municipal treasurer, 5 days a week, myself, 5 days a week.
okay,
So past staffing was the 3-day-a-week person, a 2-day-a-week person, and then the municipal treasurer as a 5-day-a-week person, and then myself as a 5-day-a-week person. So the motion that council approved before the end of their term was to allow me to continue, or to, if I chose to implement that 2-day-a-week person. And so, and it had to be within the same staffing cost in dollars comparatively from 2021.
and so is that reflected in this interim budget? So we
Yes.
can get you that extra?
It's included already.
Perfect. My final technical question is simply about costs, like trying to collect, now I've lost my language, utility penalties, there it is. How common are penalties in the town, and is it a significant revenue source for us?
Without having a balanced variance report in front of me, I don't have the concise information. However, the utility penalties are kind of a tricky one because it always reflects the revenue we're due to collect. In order to get a greater breakdown of what we actually collect versus what rolls onto the tax roll, I probably have to kind of dig through and generate a consolidated statement. However, our tax recovery has been very consistent. And typically what happens right now, we're gonna be gearing up to send out what we call the free letter. So this time of year, anyone who hasn't paid their utilities after a certain period of time, their utilities roll onto the tax roll and we charge them a gracious $40 to do it. And then therefore, once, if that amount remains unpaid on their taxes, it's subject to a 12% penalty as of the 1st of January.
Okay.
So the unpaid utilities or utility penalties are a little skewed in that way because if they remain unpaid, then they move on to uncollected taxes. And then from there, we start the tax recovery process. And in January, we send the free letter that says, hey, this is what you owe. If you pay this much by this date, it'll get you off the recovery list and recovery process. If they do not pay it by then there's a second letter that comes out that actually costs them. This past year, the charge on it went up to $350. So then that starts the tax recovery process, and we use tax service. And so they basically do like the notices, additional notices to them, and then we work collaboratively to get people back on track. Either they pay or else we start the process for selling their property.
Thank you for those answers.
Not sure if it answers your question.
It's very helpful,
but
thank you.
It is, I guess, a process, but we can also pull another BVR. It's just we usually like to share the final BVR of the year, either after the adjusting statements or adjustments have made, and then it's usually the audit.
I'm very fine waiting.
Okay.
Typically, the interim budget is not much more than a formality. It's just so that we can still keep the lights on in the new year. And then we grill her over the new budget. So would anybody care to make anything in the way of a motion on this?
Motion to approve the interim budget.
Thank you, Jackie. Any more discussion? Brian, you all right?
He passes, carries.
All in favor? Carrie.
Okay, thanks, Brian.
CN.
Oh, this was an unpleasant thing to find in my email box.
Yeah.
Humbug.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Rick. Correspondence from Canadian National Railway is attached. And so they're proposing a crossing repair or maintenance or placement to the tune of $60,830. And I just kind of reviewed it really quickly. I do have the agreement that was attached with it. However, if you guys want me to dig into more details, I did receive some
Oh, I
additional
think so.
questions.
I don't remember them ever billing us for maintenance on that crossing before.
Which crossing is it?
This is the uncontrolled one by Lakeside.
That's what I figured it was.
And I can't remember them ever billing us for that before, and
Well, has it been a while since there's some repairs on it?
it's been a while, but
Well, and the other issue is being told what we have to pay versus exploring.
and that we're
Yeah.
doing the work. So I think we need to send them a letter saying, yep, we're happy to, but you have to get a permit to shut down that street, coincidentally costing $60,000.
I'm just curious, labor. Who's not put up this, you know,
Yeah.
so
I
how
mean-
many people are they sending out, how many people do they actually need to do the job?
Well, the layer's actually over
The
$5,000.
Oh, yeah.
In
yeah,
all
sorry, yeah.
seriousness, if we're required to pay for this maintenance, we should be allowed to hire anyone we
That's
want. And
exactly
there are
what I
other
thought.
companies out there that do
Absolutely.
railway maintenance.
Well, I think there's a couple of pieces of context here. The first is there's new legislation by the federal government in 2014 that kind of mandated this get done, and they've been going after farmers, they've been going after kind of anyone they can to try and defray the costs. And my hunch here is that they're using Article 8 of the agreement. They're trying to sneak this in on us. So that agreement states that if any time during the continuance, either party wishes to widen, relocate, narrow, or otherwise upgrade the crossing, the terms will be agreed to by the parties by means of a written agreement between them. My suspicion is that they're hoping we'll just approve this, and that will constitute approval under Article 8. Article 4 of the agreement, though, says that any work done within the original highway right of way should be paid by the railway, which when I look at the list of items that they have defined, I mean, we're talking about track ballast, we're talking about track ties, fasteners, damaged rail, clanking. That to me strikes me as elements within the right of way of the railroad.
Absolutely,
Well,
this is
and
just
so
maintenance, this is
if
not an
there's
upgrade.
damage, why are we waiting till the summer?
Well, my hunch is it's not a damage thing. They're trying to come into compliance with that regulation that came out in 2014. The government extended the deadline to
that's what
November
you mean.
28th
Okay.
of this year. And so now with that legislation, my suspicion is they're trying to use Article 8 here to try and get us to agree, and we'll just take the bill and they'll move on to the next people down the road and see who they can get.
Seems to me the last big bit of maintenance / repair on that crossing would have been when they had derailment.
What was that?
More than a week ago.
It
Couple
was
years.
started in 2015. Yeah. Brian, did you have something?
No, I
here?
learned
Looked
that.
like you have a comment. That's right.
I was working for Agris, I think. Oh, geez, I don't know. Yeah, it was a while ago.
Do you want me to text Brian or can he hear you?
Can you hear me? Brian, do you have a comment? Are you looking to unmute yourself?
It's likely what he hasn't done yet.
Fuck.
There you go.
Okay, that derailment was probably 10 years ago.
Okay.
But that's the last time they would have done any amount of repairs on that. And the time before that would have been the other derailment, when they didn't actually put anything on the ground. And that would have been, I'm gonna say about 06-ish. When they ran a couple of propane tankers through town, not on the rails, but still on the wheels.
So this letter is not a letter, it doesn't appear to say, let's have a conversation. This appears to say you owe it and we'll fix it when we can. And so I expect we'll need to respond to their letter.
Well,
I have received, and I'm sorry I didn't bring a copy of your email, Kyle, with those additional questions. Thank you. So the rehabilitation question, like, so, and I don't know if you want to read your questions.
oh, I can,
to
yeah, I mean,
council, and then, because as I read them, I was thinking that it was a really great idea for us to forward those questions to the correspondent that forwarded the email information. But I just wanted the rest of council to know which questions they were, and then I'll be sure to forward the email as well.
yeah, so one of my key questions is throughout this, they really target this word rehabilitation, and it's used again and again throughout their correspondence to us. And yet, when I look at the agreement that was signed in the year 1997, long ago, that word is not there. I see words like maintenance, I see reconstruction, I don't see rehabilitation. And so I'm really curious about the legalese on that, if we can use that as a leg to stand on, because if it's maintenance, why not call it maintenance? And if rehabilitation is not maintenance, if it's indeed something else, what is it and where is it covered in this agreement? So that's one of my key questions here. I also challenged their use on the second page of their correspondence. They note that they calculated the cost of this work in accordance with the Canadian Transportation Agency Guide to Railway Charges for Crossing Maintenance Construction, which, if you look, the top Google result is 2019, but if you go on Transport Canada's website, there actually is a 2021 edition. And when we look at the overheads for labor, they're charging us 110%, when that guide that they cite, suggests 62%. So, don't tell us that you're referencing this guide. I suppose they might have referenced it and said that's not enough. So there's that as something that I'm concerned about. And then I looked at some media reports, particularly with agricultural producers and others, and they're not the same as a road authority. But as I looked at it, there's a lot of negotiations happening. You can actually see a lot of these farmers posted their agreements to news publications what's this one here, the producer.com, CTV has copies of some of these agreements, and in principle a lot of them look very similar to what we have, except they reference the landowner rather than the road authority and a couple other quirks like that. So when I look at the Western Producer having access to some of those, it just makes me wonder if they're trying to pull a fast one on us. And again, when I review the original agreement, well, I'll go back and say, when I first read this letter and read that 100% of the costs associated with the proposed maintenance work, made me wonder what council would have approved that, right? Like who's going to sign on for that? Did we get some free trees or something? And then, it doesn't pass the smell test. Well, no council is going to approve that. And you look into the agreement and it doesn't say that in there, right? It says we'll take care of our part of the right of way. We'll take care of the approach. It says nothing about any of this other work. And so I'm really skeptical. And my hunch is that we should ask for research and report on this.
Yeah, it got my attention right away when they include rail, ties, ballast. especially the ballast.
What's the cost of doing business?
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
and there's no ballast actually on the crossing. It's outside of the crossing. So,
So in terms of railway, and I'm a little unpolished, the ballast you're referring to is, would that be a type of a crossing arm or?
no, ballast is the big granite rock that they use as
Oh,
gravel.
okay,
That's the ballast.
gotcha, okay. Yeah, so after receiving Kyle's email, I was kind of thinking that I would like to just forward those questions straight through to the correspondent that provided us with this quote, being Kyle Bennett.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't feel comfortable approving this even in principle.
No, I didn't either. It'd be different if we had an agreement that we could all look at that says, but they're pulling information from.
Well, along with the email, and I apologize for interrupting, Jackie. There was a copy of the agreement that was generated and registered. It was generated with the town of Bashaw and dated the first day of May 1997.
Okay.
And then it was registered in order August 21st, 1998 through the Canadian Transportation Agency.
You got it. Is that
And so when Kyle had come by and picked up his package, he had some questions, so I provided him with a copy of the agreement. So I apologize, maybe I should have included it as well.
Yeah, that's okay, no problem.
But I can certainly forward it to council after the fact as well, and you can. Yeah,
So knowing that that agreement is in place, do we actually have a leg to stand on to go back to them and question?
I think some of Kyle's questions are really good, however, like. The way this agreement is written as well, it talks about the cost of reconstructing and maintaining the highway approaches to the crossing shall be paid by the road authority. So by definition, we're the road authority.
But the
Um,
first half of that article just finds what's their responsibility.
Yeah,
And I can't imagine that track ties are part of an approach.
yeah.
That feels like a part of the actual infrastructure the company requires.
Yeah. I think we should ask the questions for sure.
Okay,
I also wonder if it's worth approaching our member of parliament, given that this is very likely in response to federal legislation, to see if he's getting any other correspondence on this matter. Because I suspect we're not the only municipality that got a lump of coal in our stockage from CN.
well, we can have that either two ways. One would be to direct an inquiry to the MLA, or if the council, I mean.
if you remember the part,
Yeah, do that, or else, I guess, councilman can do it, yeah, either way, whichever your preference is.
you have a working relationship with him?
Somewhat, I just get his, contact email, like his newsletters and things like that. I don't have a lot of direct.
A little bit, yeah.
So I'm just gonna check and see if there's anyone else in .com. We have a Lance Lewis that joined us here at about 6:34. So yeah, I'm not sure which way you guys would like to proceed, because usually if it's political in nature, sometimes it's advantageous to have a council member interact directly, or else I can send correspondence on your behalf and just see if we can book an engagement with him and ask him to chat with us.
Should write a letter, have Rob sign it.
To Denny Crook.
And do we want Teresa to talk to?
I'll bet it.
Yes.
I think we should.
Yeah, do those.
Motion to research and report.
Motion basically to direct Councilor McIntosh's inquiry questions to CN? You feel like that would be?
I
Or do you- I'm
will,
sorry, I'm out of alignment.
no, I will move, to direct administration to forward council's, questions to, CN's Public Works Officer for the Western Region.
Any more discussion on that motion?
Sorry, you have a second. So, forward council's questions to
See it.
CN in general.
Appropriate departments, yeah.
Kyle benefits. No.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Brian, got you in there? Gotcha.
Carried. And the other one, I don't think we need a motion to just do that, do we?
So, or you wanted me to generate a letter to Jamie here?
Yeah, asking if other communities are having a similar situation to see it.
So we're wanting Teresa to generate the letter, but having signed it on.
Okay, you would, I guess any activity that you're requesting me for.
Do we want to be a little bit more specific to suggest that, you know, knowing that there's new, what was it,
Regulations.
regulations, yeah, so just sort of, I think we need to be more specific than just for
Oh,
other
yeah,
people being
no.
charged.
Well, I think both, right? The inquiry about, are you
Yeah.
hearing about this from others, but also, you know, the regulation itself is from 2014 or the legislation, but I think it kind of flew under the radar until people started getting billed.
Yeah.
And as far as I can tell, I've gone through several years worth of agenda packages. I don't see any correspondence from CN about this specifically in that time period. Now, I could have missed it, right? I just flew through and control left and did all that. But we get this lovely letter at the end of every year, which we'll see later on. And that's about the only correspondence I've seen from them. So I think this is kind of a thing that was happening in the dead of night. And I think our MP needs to be made aware of the impacts on communities and probably farmers too.
So how would you like the motion? I recommendation start. Let's see what you can do from these minutes.
Well, do you want to do the draft then, Kyle? Would you be,
I can draft a letter
and circulate it around?
and then have final approval at our next meeting.
Yeah, takes the Tuesday. You've done all the research, so I think it's a great idea.
Okay, so then council member proceed with the motion.
Yep.
And then forward into us.
Yeah.
Approve it at our next one. Or ultra, or
Whatever we need to do.
Do we need a motion to table this then for now? Or do we just move on?
No, I think we're good because we're responding to CN directly
Okay.
and letting them know we've got questions on it. And I guess I can also mention to them that we are getting in touch with them. As we have concerns.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
7.3, Highway 1221 Regional Water Services Commission operational budget. Again,
deja vu.
I do appreciate your detailed email. I was able to understand what happened anyway, for sure.
I just figured being that we had one version that had come through last council meeting and then this version ended up being approved. And I thought being that it was relevant where their amended budget proposes a water rate of $3.3.146 per cubic meter. And so at this point in time, I have no commentary on how that will impact resident water pricing, as mentioned in the early portion of this meeting, where then the next step is to have a look at what we purchased and see how it impacts us, and if we still had a comfortable little buffer in there or not. I can't say which way, whether we're looking at any type of impacting increase of towards our residents. But on the flip side, when you look at it, it is 10 cents, roughly about 10 cents a cubic meter. So if you have a resident who has, let's say, 20 cubic meters in a 2-month period, that's an increase of $2. So if my math is right.
I would like to take Brenda Knight up on her offer to
Yes.
come and
Okay.
explain 1221 to us in an environment where we are allowed to ask her questions.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, so she had, so Brian and I had a conversation with her during the break in which she had recommended, because we do have a fairly new council, that she and Dion Burlock would be able to come out here and meet with us, and both Brian and I agreed that that would be a really good idea. And so I had just said that maybe we'd get Teresa
To reach out.
to Brenda and schedule something at some point in the new year, kind of
Okay.
maybe February-ish.
so like contact outside of the council meeting, just as an informal information session, or are you wanting it to be included in on an agenda?
Either or, I think.
My personal opinion is that I really didn't understand the 1221 Water Commission until I sat in on the last 2 meetings. I have a much better understanding, and I think generally a lot of people don't have an understanding of the commission. They don't understand the historical decisions, all of that kind of stuff, and so I feel like if there was an opportunity for it to be public, so that anybody that wanted to attend could, so that they could get a little bit of education and understanding themselves, that's only a good thing, and then it saves us from having to do the education piece ourselves.
So in your email that you shared with us
Yeah.
after you attended, the reality is that the commission itself is not a body, it's not a legal body, correct? Or is
It
it?
does have a legal.
Okay,
it
so
has
Yeah,
does it have
legislation.
any, does it have any way of raising funds other than getting it from the municipalities themselves?
No.
Right, so we either pay ahead of time or we pay after,
Yes.
correct? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's generally.
And basically, that's what they said was, due to a number of extenuating circumstances that had come to light between November 12th and December 3rd, it was determined that either A, they raised the water rate at the beginning of the year, or B, at the end of the year, we would all be stuck with a bill.
But the list of unexpected things is quite staggering. I mean, it's everything from telephone bills to the line not going online, like it was 5 or 6 items, and so.
So
Nice.
I know that originally the plan was to have both Edinburgh and Clyde on the line by the end of November. At the meeting that Rob and I went to in November, it was then said that it would be delayed until March. And due to other circumstances surrounding availability of equipment, of different materials required, that everything would be delayed down now until May. And so basically,
Which is almost half.
they originally had forecasted 309,700 cubic meters for 2022. Because Edinburgh and Clyde won't be on the line until May, they dropped that forecast down to 282,450 meters. So that's a dropped increase, or a dropped rate of 23%.
So having said that though, Teresa, if Edinburgh and Clyde come on in May, could that reduce the cost the next year, or is it just absorbed?
They will adjust it annually. They'll have and so each year, each participating municipality provides a projection of what they're purchasing.
The other thing is that in 2022, the commission will start paying off a second debenture, so there's a new payment coming in for the year.
And their 3-year plan indicates that they're going to increase rates again in 22 as well as in 23. And from my viewpoint, it doesn't look like there's any possibility of rate reductions until 2031 when the first wave of
Debenture
debentures.
falls off, yeah.
So we're kind of looking at least increases for this year and the next 2 following it is my standpoint, which I mean $2 every couple months right now, but that does compound over time.
Yeah, so the water we pay for, whatever we use, we pay for. So it's the debentures that are causing the difference, right? I mean, you pay for the water you use, period.
Yeah.
I think there's other expenses when you look
Yeah,
at the big pie chart.
I think that,
And for me, that's where it comes down to is who has the authority to tell the operations staff there to sharpen your pencil and tighten your belt? That you don't get to just use a wrench once and throw it away and go buy a new one.
Well, which is really interesting because they spent $5,000 on hand tools in the last year, and past years they spent only a couple hundred.
so my understanding there is that, there's a hill in Clive that's basically made of granite. And it was eating through bits like crazy, and so they had to bring in a special bit to drill through that, which was quite costly.
Yeah, that wouldn't be part of the hand tools, though. That's part of the construction.
Okay.
Like they're talking
Right,
a drilling
yeah.
bit, not.
No, no, no,
Yeah.
no, I know and I understand that, I just didn't know where that would fall in, if that would fall in.
I also think the commission needs to look going forward in its contracts. A 9% administration fee to me is obscene. When I look at school boards and other public entities, they operate on anywhere from 2 to 5%, with 3 being kind of the optimal target. So 9% doesn't seem right. And then I look and I see that our administration contracts to a voting member, and you know, that raises some questions that I'd love to address to the commission in their presentation.
Could I just say something?
Yes, Brian?
I might be wrong, but I believe some of that administration is tied up in the actual new lines, because the commission is doing the administration of that themselves. And once those new lines are in, that administration cost may come down.
You would expect it to go down, Brian?
Yes, because the physical addition of the lines is going to be done. Like right now, they are still managing the actual work of the 2 lines. And after this, the lines are completed. There will be no more administration as far as current projects.
I have a philosophical question. We received correspondence from another municipality that seemed to suggest that the spirit and intent of the commission's bylaws in regard to consultation was perhaps fudged this time. Do we have a sense that that's actually the case, or is that just the perspective of another municipality?
I would hazard to guess that it wasn't fudged so much as just they do things their way, and when we question it at the commission level, we're told we can't.
Yeah.
We can gripe and moan here all we want, but as soon as we take our gripes and moans there, we're told to put on our commission hats and follow along.
Well, this is,
Yeah, but
And that's my question, who provides oversight of this group?
yeah, there's oversight.
well,
And that's a
how does
question
the
I've been
average
asking since
resident,
2007.
yeah, how does the average resident of Bashaw get a say when their water prices are going up every year for 3 years? Now, the residents of Bashaw might not see this, but in some form or another, right, we as a town, as a tax base, are going to be paying some form of increase. And so where's the voice, right? Our training, right? George Cuss specifically, you know, even cautioned us about being part of entities where we would not be counselors for this corporation first and foremost, and yet we have people in a spot where they're not allowed to be counselors first and foremost.
Who does oversee the C, whatever, is it CEO, CAO, whatever the person is that's operate, like the person who puts together the
The
budget?
commission manager is the one that puts together the working budget.
So that was Ken Morris and
And
has been,
who oversees him?
or Keith Morris, yeah.
And now it's that Dion.
Yeah, as of December 31st, Keith retires, and that's a very great question, and it's actually one that since our meeting, I have reflected on wondering myself.
So is it the board?
I would presume that it's the board. I don't know, Brian, you sound like you might have a comment. Well, and I was just thinking, I guess, to wrap it up, but having Dion and Brenda in, and then that way we can directly ask them and get information.
I did,
So it may go back to which way do you guys want to proceed, whether you want to do it as a public meeting or if you want to.
I would do it as a public meeting.
I would like to do it as a
Like
public
a special meeting of council.
Could be.
I did also bring with me some information that we got at our December 10th meeting. So this is the 2015 business plan that was put together. I've got just our agenda package. And then this is also the project status report for phase 6 and 7, which is the Edinburgh Bay Clyde transmission main. So if anybody wants to read through this, some
If-
reading, yeah.
Go ahead, Brian. Sorry, Rob.
If you're going to have a meeting with the commission, with Brenda, I think it should just be council and get everybody enlightened as far as how the commission works. To have a public meeting, I think, is not going to do you much good until the council themselves has a good understanding of it, and then decide if you want to go public. But I think you need to start with the council first.
See that?
Are not our meetings public by their nature though?
There's a difference between having a public meeting and having a meeting where you invite the public.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, like,
at a regular council meeting, the public is allowed as spectators.
Yeah, the public is allowed to come, but to have it advertised as just a water commission meeting, I think you need to just address it in council first and then decide if you want to take it past that.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was what I,
We also have a need to, this is sort of off topic, but it fits the theme. So please call me out of order if I am. We still have a need to have the RCMP presentation. And one of the things that was indicated to us is that Mondays were not tenable for the acting commander. So could we book a special meeting on a night that's not a Monday and do a 2-for-1 kind of show?
that'd be all right with that, depending on the time. But that would be in the new year, subject to participants' availability.
Always away.
So do we want to accept this as information for the time being?
Can't do
Is that all we can do? Of course, if nobody puts that into a motion, then what?
Oh, fine. We'll make a motion to accept it as information.
Thank you, Cindy. All in favor? Carried. Is our delegation here, or do we want to?
There's one individual, I believe, Louise.
So we want to proceed with that part and then come back to the. Okay, well, let's do that then.
I will excuse myself and you'll text me when you want me to come back.
Thank you, Jackie. Somebody care to make a motion of going?
I can make a motion that we enter closed session at 7:01 PM and clear the gallery.
Thank you, Kyle. All in favor?